Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the EPZ K1 1+1 hybrid, and also their EPZ TP30, which is a dongle deck, using an ESS chip. Anyway, let me just quickly take you through the boxes, and then we'll get into more details. First of all, the dongle, nice slide open box, nice presentation. The dongle came over here, brings a nice cable. Brings some literature explaining as well what all the lights on the actual dongle they're lighting up mean and what it don't mean. Also gives you the output and some of the specs of the dongle. It's got a single-ended 3.5 and then a balanced. There is a little bit of a I'm not going to say a confusion, but a little bit of a on the EPZ AliExpress store, when you actually look up the TP30, it mentions that the TP30 has a 2-volt RMS output in single-ended, which basically translates to about 125 milliwatts at 32 ohms, and a 4-volt output at also 32 ohms in the balanced, which gives you 270 milliwatts. Over here, it says it's a 2-volt. If you look carefully, it says 2 volts for the single-ended and also 2 volts for the balanced. So I don't know if maybe this is a mistake or something. I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is, as I mentioned, there's actually two models. There's a TP20 and a TP30. This is the better one. It's the gold one. It uses the ESS 9032Q2 chip and also uses the RT6863 independent amplifier chip. This is the actual unit itself. Volume buttons. Okay, nice weight to it. Connection for the USB. Connection for the earphones. It's got a nice weight. It looks nice. It looks really nice. And even this gold color, which you might think could look perhaps a little bit blingy or something, no, it looks nice. It actually looks like a little bar of gold, to be honest with you. Okay, so that's the TP30, and then the K1. Simple box. It brings a cable with a microphone, which honestly I'm not really too fond of it. It brings the usual typical storage little case, it's a flannel kind of cloth affair. It brings the usual EPZ tips, which again, in my opinion, are not the ideal to actually extract the best performance out of the K1. Neither the dual flange or these kind of narrow bore, shallow tips. I don't think that either one of them actually do justice to the K1, as has been the case with the K5 and also the 620, the hybrid set. Anyway, this is what it is, and we can't really complain too much. And this is not really a complaint. It's just a small remark, a small attention that must be kept in mind, in my opinion. Anyway, that's the box for either one of the two items. This is the actual K1. Very light IM, nice resin shell. You've got several colors available. You can also customize if you want the actual final appearance. They provide that possibility. The standard 4 colors are white. There's a blue one. There's this nice purple one, which is my favorite, and there's also an orange one. But as I said, you can customize it with quite a few other options in terms of the color. This particular model, K1, has actually been around for quite a while. I mean, this is not a recent model of EPZ. This 1+1 has been around for a long time. And that's basically it. In terms of the cable, I actually just picked up the cable from a Celeste just to connect it up for the majority of the listening. And it's fine. I mean, it doesn't, honestly, a cable is cables are what they are. I'm not going to say that if you go and spend more money in a cable, you probably want maybe extract a little bit more performance. But I found that overall this cable of the Celeste was more than enough and way better than the standard cable, to be honest. Anyway, that's the K1. This is the TP30. What else do I have here to compare it with? Well, TRN TA1 Max, 1+1 as well. So all of these IEMs in front of us have got that commonality. They are all 1+1, although one of them is actually 1+1, but it's a planar 1+1 and the second driver is a semi-planar driver. Let's be semi-planar driver, okay? It's not a true planar in the sense of the conventional planar technology, but is a planar driver because the diaphragm is in a flat plane. But anyway, so we've got here the TA1 Max. Still, in my opinion, although it's now been substituted by the TA3, I still feel this is the best of the TA series. It uses a 10mm beryllium coated driver. Basically, it's the same driver that you find in the SD5, and then a 33518 BA for complementing the highs. Nice punchy mid-bass focused sound, real emphasis on that, and then the rest of the frequency is there, not overly energetic, so it's got a darker sound, but it's nice, it's engaging, it's a very nice sounding IEM actually. I really enjoyed it. This is one of those IEMs that falls into the category of what I call bouncy IEMs. You know, they're supposed to be fun, engaging, not for ultimate critical listening. The K1 uses the 9.2 millimeter driver with the BA. From what I was able to ascertain, I believe it's also a 33518. As for the beryllium, as for the actual driver itself, the 9.2 millimeter, I wasn't able to actually find out what was the material used in the diaphragm, but that's what it is. As I mentioned, light in terms of its weight. Fits nicely, isolates beautifully, no real issue, and it has a very similar signature actually to the TA1, although with a less prominent mid-bass impact and a little bit more energetic in the mids and in the highs. So different sort of a balance, although the sound of these two is kind of the same vibe. It's a little bit different of a balance, this one pending towards much better vocals and ultimately much better technicalities as well. Next to that, the HIFIGO MS2. I'll give you the prices after I've finished this initial presentation. HIFIGO MS2 1+1, a 10.2 millimeter driver, 33518 once again. Again, a signature which is kind of similar to these two, but it's the leanest of the three in terms of the bass, although it has that similar bump or characteristic of being mid-bass focused, and then it's also the one that's the most energetic. So it's the one where the BA is more in your face. It has good points and bad points with that. And then finally on this corner, the C Audio, the Zeos collaboration, the Rinco. It's a coaxial setup using a dynamic driver, and then for the bass and for the mids, and then complemented by a second driver, which is a 6 millimeter, let's call it semi-planar driver. The most V-shaped of them all, it was given the reputation of being a bass monster. I particularly didn't find it to be a bass monster. It's got nice bass, yes I do, and also the fact that being a planar was supposed to have brought about this whole very open, very planar-like type of sound. But again, no, it is nice, it is decent, it is fine. Perhaps if the bass wasn't as prominent, maybe that second semi-planar driver would shine. But as it is suffice. But it's by no means a detail monster. It's by no means IEM which has a sound which is conducive of what you would expect from a planar application, okay, of the more usual type, let's put it that way. Prices. roughly $40 for this, around $45 for this, about $70 for that, and about $90 for that. You can get this at HIFIGO, you can get this at HIFIGO, you can get this at HIFIGO. Well, I mentioned HIFIGO because I actually got them all from HIFIGO. This one is the only one I got directly from the EPZ store on AliExpress. Okay, sound. All of these IEMs are, as I mentioned, IEMs that fall into a category that I kind of call bouncy. And by bouncy, I mean they're engaging, they're satisfying various degrees then of capabilities in terms of their vocal presentation, various degrees as well of what you would call as well their technical abilities. But they all have a fun bass, the high-dis being the one that's the less prominent, but still nice. Still, it's more than it's fine. It's not as lean as the graph will kind of lead you believe when I show you the graph in a couple of minutes. This is the heaviest in terms of the mid bass impact. This is more balanced out across the board from the mid bass to the mids and how everything kind of matches across. And this one is the most prominent in terms of the sub bass. And then has, and also has crazy peanut gains on both ends. I mean, this is definitely the most V-shaped out of all of them. The sound in more detail of the K1. Fast enough bass. I mean, the driver seems to be a capable driver. Seems to be a driver that is capable of having a good speed, good resolution. Doesn't linger when it hits. It's got good decay. Decent enough resolution. Again, let's not forget we're talking $45. Okay, so for a 1+1 of decent construction, and with this kind of level of sound, it's not bad. I'm not going to say that you perhaps can't find better single dynamics. Probably you can, but for what it is, it didn't offend me in any manner. The mids are fine again. The way that the integration between the mid bass and the mids is done, the peanut gain, everything is reasonable. There's no aggressiveness, no harshness. The only real area where there is a little bit of excessive energy is around the 5K-ish area, but it never really offended me. It never really got to a point where I would say, oh no, this is getting too much. I don't like the way it is. No. And then past 10K, there is also a little bit of extension, which can sometimes come across a little bit BA-ish like. Okay, unquestionably, out of all of these, the one that has that most prominent BA timbre is the high-dis, especially when you take the MS2 and you really push it, then it really shines. At lower volumes, yes, it is probably the one that's the most detailed, the one that will give you the most sense of loudness. Very detailed, very good detailed retrieval. Imaging is spot on. So the technicalities, probably the high-dis will be the one that kind of shines the most out of all. But at, as I said, a volume level, I would say up to about 60%. Above that, it then starts kind of crumbling that balance between everything starts crumbling, and it does become aggressive. I mean, there are points there where, although I like the MS2 and I've always liked the MS2, it can become a little bit too much. All right, in that aspect, both the K1 and the TA are better. Even when you push the volume, I never found the TA to be aggressive or this to also be aggressive or anything of the sort. The TA does have a tendency of, when you crank the volume, so the scaling of the TA, to emphasize even more the bass, and that kind of smothers the rest with its good and its bad points, obviously. So if you like EDM, if you like rap, I guess that would be probably a good thing. And even the occasional rock music. This one, it scales pretty decently. I mean, very balanced always. I would probably say out of these three in particular, it's the one that maintains its composure the best. Technically, soundstage is wide enough. I think the biggest or the best characteristic that it has is height and depth, not so much the width. There's not so much that sensation of big space, but it's got good depth, good width. Good height and good depth, not so much the width. Decent imaging, superior to the imaging of the TA, definitely. Detailed retrieval as well, decent, and it maintains that level of detailed retrieval as it scales, as you increase the volume. So overall, when I take into consideration, how it performs at low volume, mid volume, and high volume, it is, out of the three, the best one, okay, in terms of its technical capabilities. So cleanliness of the mids, how the vocals are presented, how everything scales nicely, resolution, detailed retrieval, imaging, soundstage, it is the best of the three. In second place, I would probably say these two, or they come at the same level, because both of them at lower volumes, they are decent. Okay, this one being darker, this one being significantly brighter, more open sounding. But then when you start increasing the volume, this becomes even further darker, more darker, and this kind of just gets into that area where knives are being thrown at your ears, basically. I'm sure maybe it could be something that some people will appreciate. I personally, because of really my hearing capability, it just is too much. Period. For me, it's just too much. As compared with the Rinco, how do I rate the K1 compared to the Rinco? To be very honest and straight to the point, I prefer the K1 to the Rinco. Okay, I find that the K1 offers an overall more balanced sound. There are more occasions where I see the Rinco falling apart and not having what I would expect to be the performance out of a $90 IEM. I mean, if I have to give more concrete examples of what I'm talking about, let's take, for example, The City from John Mark and Paul Brown. The guitar, the cymbals, I'm sure you can hear the song a little bit in the background. Much more satisfying in the K1. It just sounds nicer. Even his voice sounds nicer as well. Another one, Willow Weep for Me from Jacinta. You have that sax, and you have a voice which is, it's a very, you have to listen to the song to actually understand what I'm saying. It's a very characteristic voice. It's got I don't know how to describe. It's just got this very airy kind of feel, her voice. Okay. Again, over here it just sounds more realistic. It sounds more true. That excessive balance or that excessive V shape, of the signature just closes down her voice. What You're Gonna Do from Framework Home. Once again, a song that I preferred on the K1 as opposed to the Rinco. But obviously, I'm not saying it's all K1 winning all the time. No, for example, if I look at, for example, let's see, Silence and Secrets. The K1 has got a little bit more impact in the bass, yes, but that does confer the song that fullness that it has. That this particular song has got a very full bass, and that does bring it across better. Make Your Day from Low Deep T as well. The Rinco does give it just that little extra emphasis. Okay. Not saying in any way that the K1 doesn't do it well. One song that, for example, the K1 does very well, and I really enjoyed it, was Sunrise, the live version from Larry Carlton. The K1 does that song beautifully. It really comes across really well. It really does it well. the guitar, the way the bass line is, it underlying that guitar playing, very nice. The K1 does it really, really in a very bouncy manner, like I say, or like I like characterizing these IEMs. One thing I forgot to actually mention was in terms of the timbre and the tonality, how realistic they are. The timbre and tonality here is fine, although it is a little bit thick, and yes, you do notice an excessive husk in female voices, and male voices probably can also sometimes come across as being just overly thick. Over here it's the exact opposite. The timbre and the tonality is very nice up to a certain volume, but then because of the volume and the way that it scales, it just kind of, as I said before, falls apart. The timbre and tonality in the Rinco and in the K1, the K1 comes out on top. It ends up being more balanced, and I think I mean, this is not me trying to say that the Rinco is bad or the K1 is the one to go for. No, I'm just, there's a specific reason why I chose these IEMs, and that reason is to try and well, first of all, for those that maybe have these IEMs, you get a perception of what this can sound like compared. That has got decent timbre and tonality, but it sounds excessively colored. It kind of suffers of the same problem as on the TA1 Max. The bass there renders things just a little bit unrealistic. In that aspect, this is more correct. Okay, the K1 overall, considering the various volume levels, how it scales and everything, it always maintains a very decent composure in terms of its timbre and tonality, and that's why I think it's better in that aspect. What tips did I use, just for the sake of also you guys knowing? I used the KB 07, the Cian tips, which is the medium sized. And then one other thing that I of course want to bring to your attention is selection of the DAC amp or whatever you want to, or you're going to have connected up to it. Obviously, having the TP30, I use the TP30 with any one of these, and then I compare the TP30 with a combination or an amp which I've had already for quite some time, and I hadn't used it for a long time, which is the Runabout Plus from Venture Electronics, which I've got it over here. Okay. You go. The Runabout Plus, the nice thing that I've always liked about it, which, for example, the Megatron does have an improvement over it, but at the same time it loses a little bit to the Runabout 5, in my opinion, which is the Megatron, and I've also got a chain, I also used it. Okay, the Megatron is on a different level of cleanliness, on a different level of detail, and with IEMs which are darker sounding, for example the case of the TA1 Max, it helps out. There's a nice synergy between these two, and that synergy also exists, for example, with the Rinco. There's a nice synergy there. It helps them out to counteract perhaps that excessive warmth that exists in the sound. However, when I connect the Megatron, for example, with the MS2 with the high dis, that is not a favorable combination, because that is, let's say, a brighter sounding IEM compared to the rest of air, and this ability that the Megatron has to bring out details and so on and so forth can make it less polished. Compared to the when I connected the K1 to the Megatron, it wasn't bad. It was fine. I liked it. It did the job beautifully. I mean, everything was nice. But there is just something about the way that the K1 interacts with the Runabout 5 that it's just short of sounding excessive in what I'm about to say, but it just sounds very magical. This combination of Runabout 5 with the K1 sounds absolutely exquisite, period. It just sounds very good, very, very good. And that sound that I got here is a sound that I found I would say 95% with the TP30 connected up with the K1. I don't know, it's using an ESS chip, so obviously details and kind of that aspect of the sound, it's very capable, more so I would say probably than even the Runabout 5, definitely. But it's got that the TP30. I mean, yes, it's $85, so it's not that it's expensive. It falls within what is the usual price of dongles at this price and what they offer and so on and so forth. But it's just got this very nice kind of organic, old school vibe to it. It sounds more organic, okay? It sounds more old school than the Megatron. Obviously different power levels, of course. The Megatron is way more powerful than the TP30. But and the Megatron as well wasn't optimized to a certain extent to work with IEMs, although it can. I mean, it's got all the outputs 2.5 for 4.4, 3.5, or it can drive cans, big cans, more than well, except maybe it might struggle a little bit with some planars. But the cleanliness of the Megatron sound renders it sometimes perhaps a little bit clinical, like I was saying earlier, and it can make the choice of IEM that you have connected up to it be something that you have to be or pay specific attention to. Okay, the TP30 has got that same level, I would say, of cleanliness and detail that you get in the Megatron, but it's got very much that the Science Logic 43131 kind of vibe. It's got it is I can't really it's a difficult one to explain. It just has a clinical organic sound, if that in any way makes sense, what I'm trying to explain. So what is my basic conclusion about the TP30? Very capable DAC amp. Obviously, it's competing against the more established players in the market. Channeling and topping, and there's dozens of other little DAC amps that people will probably trust more over the EPZ because of their reputation and the fact they've been around for longer. But the truth is this is a well built, it's a well executed little DAC amp. It's got some nice features. You've got your volume, you can change from high to low gain, dual outputs for balanced and for unbalanced connection of IEMs or even cans. I mean, I didn't try any cans on here, but I'm sure this thing can easily power many headphones. It's got a nice form factor. It doesn't weigh too much. It is a little bit heavier than some other little doggle dabs, but the sturdiness of the construction is the reason why it's got this weight. And it just marries very nicely with the K1. I tried it as well with the K5 just to see how it would sound, and again I got that same kind of synergy, which makes me kind of perhaps think that this was built or done or optimized to a certain extent to work really well with the EPZ stuff. I could be just saying something which is absolute nonsense, but I feel that they've done that. They've kind of tried to make the TP30 match very nicely with their earphone products. Anyway, guys, I'll show you now the graphs, and we'll wrap it up after that. Okay, take care. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section of the EPZ K1 review. So let me just take away the graphs here. Excuse me. So let's start straight away with the graph of the K1. this one, sorry, not this one either. It is this one. Okay, this is the graph of the K1. As I mentioned in the review, it's got a nice emphasis on the mid bass. Yes, it makes it colored, it makes it a little bit excessive to a certain extent, you could say, but it's not that it bleeds tremendously into the mids. It's just got this very prominent emphasis in the, let's say, 50-60 hertz to about 120 area, and then it starts rolling off into the sub bass, and it makes then the bass frequency is very bouncy. So it's not an IM that exactly rumbles or anything of the sort, but it's very bouncy. And the nice thing is that they've kind of matched that level there with the level of the mids and upper mids. So any possible aggressiveness that might exist kind of is taken away. As I mentioned, there's then that peak at around 5, which isn't as prominent as you would think by the graph. Then there's another peak here, close to 8K, which is a coupler related peak, and then some extension past 10K. Although graphically you might not think, I did find that this extension sometimes it was actually, well, it could also have been the combination of these two previous peaks plus that, but it kind of was, in my opinion, the part that was responsible for you picking up on the BA timbre. It wasn't a bad BA timbre, mind you, nothing that I would personally think, oh no, this is really badly done, and no. But look, it is what it is. The next one I'm going to show you is the HIFIGO, the MS2. I've normalized everything at 1K. Definitely leaner in the bass. And although it kind of, the transition, let me just take away, the EPZ, okay? The bass and the transition to the mids and the initial pin again up to about 2K is not bad. There's a prominence on the mids and the upper mids, definitely. But then definitely this amount of energy that you find here is very noticeable, and if at lower volumes, as I mentioned, does open up the sound, that does create a sense of soundstage, of imaging that is perhaps a little bit forced. Once the volume is pushed, then you notice it very much. And when you put the two together, let me just change the color here of the EPZ to black so we can better see it. It's the balance of everything that it becomes more favorable to the EPZ at the end of the day, because when we look at, let me just take it away a second, when we look at the HIFIGO, the MS2, you have everything starting at 76 at the lowest point and going up to 80, so 4 or 5 dBs of gain into the bass, which is very nice. But then you have a gain going up into the highest points of the mids, which is so from there 76, 88, so 12 dBs, and it's the difference that basically exists between these two peak points here, the peak of the bass and then the peak of the upper mids, that is the problem that kind of helps the sound to a certain extent, but then makes it a little bit excessive. On the other hand, when we look at the K1, it starts off at 77, goes up to 84, so there's a 7.5 dB gain into the bass, which is nice. And again, the upper mids, you have about the same thing, a little bit more, because upper mids, the gain, the maximum point of the upper mids is about 85, so 9 dBs, you could say. So again, let me just show you. So 77, then 86, about 9 dBs. And this balance, because it's been more well struck, let's put it that way, gives it a sound which is more more satisfying. Okay. Next one. This is the the TA1 Max. Unquestionably the one that's the most heavier in the bass department, up to the ones that I've shown up to now. Very big mid bass bump, with then a good amount of rumble. I mean, there isn't really there's maybe a dB and a half of drop. So it is, if the song has it will definitely showcase that rumble. And then the rest, the pin again is fine, and the way it carries itself through, it's fine. It's just that this balance is now being struck the opposite way. While on, for example, let me show you again, while in the MS2 you have a balance which strikes towards the mids and the highs, with a leaner bass. On the TRN, that balance is struck the opposite way. You have a emphasis on the bass, with a darker sounding signature. So those that perhaps are more a little bit treble sensitive will definitely prefer this one. And then finally, the graph of the Rinko, which is this one. 77 to 89, so 12 dBs of gain into the bass, 12 dBs of gains into the upper mids, of the gain into the upper mids. But then it suffers of two issues, in my opinion, the Rinko, which is there's a lot of bleed. There's, because of this balance, the way this drops here, there is an excessive amount of bleed into the mids, which just closes them down. Fun and engaging, but not the best for detail retrieval. And then you have this big dip here between 4 and 8 roughly, which shuts down too much as well, the IEM. It showcases a lot of extension past 10K, which doesn't really exist, or maybe, yes, maybe you could say that it does exist, but because of this excessive amount of energy that comes from behind, it camouflages it out completely, it cancels it out completely, it closes it down. If maybe this was a little bit less, perhaps that would be more prominent. And when compared with the K1, you can see what I was saying. It is, although there's a decent balance in the Rinko between the bass and the mids, it is excessively V-shaped, and that excessive V-shape just closes down anything that has to do with vocals and instruments and so on. It's the way that it was tuned. Fine, whatever, it is what it is. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little review of mine. Any questions, as usual, please feel free to ask. And hit that subscribe button. Don't hit it, smash it. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.